Thank you. Well, as he said, my name is Luke Beard, and my son's Sunday school teacher this morning said that he asked for prayers for me because I haven't preached in 5 years. So I used to be in ministry, formal ministry, I guess. I don't know. Everyone is ministry. I mean, your whole life's ministry, but church ministry. I went to school for youth and preaching, kind of like a combination thing, and I worked in youth and family and associate pastor, preaching, ministry, whatever you want to call it, roles for about 8 years. And then right around COVID time, we reassessed our lives, just like a lot of people did, especially when finances were kind of stretched thin. And at that time, we said, if God was calling us somewhere, where would it be? And house parenting just came to the forefront. And after weeks and months in prayer and searching, we fell in love with Cookson Hills. It was one of those things that we saw different places and different programs and interviewed them, and we got interviewed, and we didn't visit those places except for Cookson, but just the difference that we saw with the love and the desire to serve was just exceedingly bigger and more powerful than we could see at Cookson over any of the other places we looked at. And I'm not saying there aren't other places there that are wonderful and care for the kids and serve the Lord, but that was the one that really drew to us for wanting to not just be a part of it, but start a family there. And we already had Lincoln at the time, but then we had Lewis there, and we've kind of grown as a little family, and then we also have grown much larger as a bigger family. When we first started, we were primary, and so primary means we have kids permanently. So it grew to having 8 to 9 or so kids in our house, and then it transitioned when the need arose, and we became respite because people who are full-time parents know that sometimes it's good to have a break, and when you have 8, 9, 10 kids from trauma backgrounds, you really need a break. So we provide that break for them, and so throughout the month, they come to us for about a week, and we are their aunts and uncles, whatever you want to call it. We're kind of the parental role for that week, and their parents can have a little bit of a break. And so we get kids cycling through our house every month, and it's been wonderful to be able to connect with all of them and know their stories and help them as they work through all of that. And so today I want to preach, but also incorporate some of that story. And it really comes about from living out in 1,000 acres of Cookson Hills. So we have 1,000 acres, and it's kind of hard to, unless you're a farmer or a rancher, 1,000 acres is kind of like saying, I have $1 million. And it's like, well, what's $1 million? You can't really visualize it. It's a big number. And so 1,000 acres is one of those things where it's like you can say it, but until you're out there and you're traveling and you're going in all these places, you don't realize it's a lot. It's a lot of land out there. We really don't use most of that land because that's a lot of land. So we only use a couple hundred acres with our houses and our school and things like that, with our ranch for the horses. But we have about 600 to 800 that we have out there where we have cattle, and we get to explore it. And so being there for the last 5 years, we have enjoyed connecting with our kids in various different ways. I mean, if your parents or grandparents or have any kind of family, kids love to be out and doing things. Even if they say they don't want to do things, usually when you finally get them to do the thing, they enjoy the thing. You might have seen that at VBS where you have a kid who's like, I don't want to do that. I don't want to get up and dance. Then you get up, you kind of get them moving, and then they're having fun and they're excited. So we learned that these kids, they may have come from a life where they just sat on their tablets all day and done nothing but watch TV and play video games. So getting them out there and getting them moving is a great way to interact with them, but also a great way to Just hear their stories, because kids are way more engaged and conversational when you're just doing something simple with them, like going on a drive, going on a walk, things like that. And so having all that acreage out there allows us to connect with them in very unique ways. Trails, hiking, and one of them is going out, and we don't hang out with the cattle, but some of the kids really like kind of seeing the cattle, because a lot of them don't have no interaction. I was just talking to Kevin about how, I think I was talking to you about it, about how some of the kids make a comment like they don't like meat with bones in it. And I'm like, well, all meat has bones in it. It's just got removed at some point. So a lot of them aren't used to that idea of the animals and stuff, and so they're intrigued by the horses and the cattle and things like that. So we like taking them out there. Sometimes we're walking, sometimes we're riding bikes, and most recently, I got a golf cart. Ever since I moved onto that campus, I was like, I want a golf cart. It's perfect for that. It's this little neighborhood, and you can kind of drive around. And it took 5 years to convince my wife to let me get a golf cart. So she likes it, but just I'm the one that uses it more. But I did not realize how much I use that golf cart to connect with the kids, taking them out on these drives and just exploring out and about. Because I have taken kids on bikes, I have taken them on walks, but they usually get worn out about halfway where we're going. I literally had a kid who we were riding a bike, and we got about halfway through the pasture, and I wanted to keep going, and I turned around, and he's there on the ground just breathing hard, and I was like, I guess we got to turn around. He's like, I can't do it. I was like, okay, let's turn around. We're going back. We can get everybody out there and exploring. And not fancy. It's living life, getting dirty, but it's one of those ways that we can connect. And when I'm out there, I get to see creation, get to see the beauty of just everything that God has made. But there's this one trail we drive, and it is, I think it's this next slide out here. Is it? Go point that way. Sorry. So this is our main road. It kind of loops around the whole property, goes up the hill. And then right there is the beginning of our road. And so that's our main roadway I drive through when I take the kids out. And right now you can see it. It's right there. It's a gravel road. This is probably the most traffic you get. It's where the ranchers go. It's where we go to, I don't know if you've ever lived on a farm, but there's always the hole in the ground that you dump stuff in, like the burn pile. Our burn pile's back there. So it gets a lot of use in that little spot. And so it starts out as this normal country road, and then, whoops, it starts to thin out a little bit because of the burn pile. So less traffic. This is where mainly just the rancher goes out to feed his cattle. It winds, ups, downs, and it gets a little bit thinner. And then you get a little bit further out. And this is, the rancher still drives out there, but he's maybe not feeding the cattle right in that. It's the second pasture. There's 3 different pastures. And so you're winding up and down, twisting, turning, and it gets a little bit thinner. But you can still see the trail. And then it kind of is like, well, is that a trail or is that just like splotchy grass? And you're up and down, twisting, turning. Then you get to the far end of pasture 3, and you kind of go, is that even a road? It is. It's a road. The truck does drive down there. But then you get up to the top of that ridge line, and you go, And the first time I drove out, actually I rode my bike out there the first time, I was like, oh, the road ended. But as I got out there more and more and got used to the area and knew the area more, I realized there actually is a road. Can anyone see it? Well, I highlighted it for you in the next slide. It's right there. I don't know if anyone had noticed it, but that is a road. And if you follow that road, it's flat. If you, off to the left, you can't tell. There's a dip, and it dips down about 2 feet. The kids really like it when I accidentally drive into that one because we go, ooh, and we kind of jump up and down. But that is the road, that is the flat, that is the safe spot. If you go off to the left, you're getting up and down and walking, wonky kind of stuff. You go to the right, you kind of slope down, and it's not good. That is where you need to go if you're wanting to drive safely and properly. And it made me think of a passage. Made me think of the narrow gate passage, which is in Matthew 7. If you are reading your Bibles, we are going to actually be in Matthew 7 for a little bit. But the main passage I want to talk about is what he said at the end of his Sermon on the Mount. It says, "Enter through the narrow gate. For the gate is wide and road broad that leads to destruction, and there are many who go through it. How narrow is the gate and difficult the road that leads to life, and few find it." Now, this is again at the tail end of his Sermon on the Mount, full of amazing practical wisdom. Honestly, it's one of the passages that even non-Christians quote, usually incorrectly, but they quote it, and they like to get little bits of wisdom, and it's almost like the Proverbs of the New Testament, and Jesus is just giving these little bits of life advice. But it's actually all connected. If you read it as a whole, often we read it in these little chunks, and we go, oh, this is the narrow gate passage, this is the wise and foolish passage, this is the parents are good passage, but God's better. They look at these little bits, but they really all connect. And so I want to read chapter 7 through and kind of just help understand the context of what he's talking about with this narrow gate. So in chapter 7, verse 1, it talks about judging. And this is definitely one of the verses that a lot of non-Christians like to quote incorrectly. But we know that this passage is a great passage to learn about how we connect with others and live life. It says, "Do not judge so that you won't be judged. For you will be judged by the same standard with which you judge others. And you will be measured by the same measure you use. Why do you look at the splinter in your brother's eye, but don't notice the beam of wood in your own eye? Or how can you say to your brother, 'Let me take the splinter out of your own eye,' and look, there's a beam of wood in your own eye? Hypocrite, first take the beam of wood out of your eye, and then you will be able to clearly see and take the splinter out of your brother's eye. Don't give what is holy to dogs, or toss your pearls before pigs, or they will trample them under their feet, turn and tear you to pieces. Ask and it will be given to you, seek and you will find, knock and the door will be open. For everyone who asks receives, and the one who seeks finds, and the one who knocks the door will be open. Who among you, if a son asks for bread, will give him a stone? If then you who are evil know how to give good gifts to your children, how much more will your Father in heaven give good things to those who ask him? Therefore, whatever you want others to do for you, do also the same for them. Others as he would have them do unto you, the golden rule. For this is the law and the prophets. Enter through the narrow gate, for the gate is wide and the road broad that leads to destruction. There are many who go through it. Narrow is the gate and difficult the road that leads to life, and few find it. Be on your guard against false prophets who come to you in sheep's clothing, inwardly ravaging wolves. You will recognize them by their fruit. Are grapes gathered from thorn bushes, figs from thistles? In the same way, every good tree produces good fruit, but every bad tree produces bad fruit. A good tree cannot produce good fruit. Every tree that doesn't produce good fruit is cut down and thrown in the fire. So you will recognize them by their fruit. Not everyone who says to me, 'Lord, Lord,' will enter the kingdom of heaven, but only the one who does the will of my Father in heaven. On that day, many will say to me, 'Lord, Lord, didn't we prophesy in your name, drive out demons in your name, and do many miracles in your name?' Then I will announce to them, 'I never knew you. Depart from me, you lawbreakers.' Therefore, everyone who hears these words of mine and acts like them, built his house on the solid rock. The rain fell, the rivers rose, the winds blew and pounded that house, yet it did not collapse because its foundation was on the rock. But everyone who hears these words of mine and doesn't act on them will be like a foolish man who built his house on the sand. The rain fell, the rivers rose, the winds blew and pounded that house, and it collapsed with a great crash." So we look at this chapter, 5, 6, and 7 is that whole sermon, but we look at chapter 7, and if you look at it carefully, you see how they all connect. So at the beginning, he's talking about judging and how we should be careful how to judge because we're also going to be judged. And he doesn't say don't judge, he just says be careful about it because you're going to be, the same measure that is used for your judging will be measured against you. So then if you're confused about what it is that you should do, how to judge, how to handle life, you ask God of it. And so you see right after that, it's ask, seek, and knock. Find the wisdom of God. Not the world's wisdom, but God's wisdom. Because if you ask of God's wisdom, he will give it to you. And so you look at asking and searching, and then he says, with the wisdom of God, here is a bit of wisdom. Follow my wisdom. So if you want wisdom, this is the wisdom. Follow me. And how to do that? You bear good fruit in faith and in God's love and in his kingdom. That looks like you look at the wise man and the foolish man. So you see how it all just kind of goes back and forth, all on top of each other. So he gives us warnings, he gives us advice, and he helps us to understand what we are supposed to do in our lives. But it's a life that is a path. It's a life that is a constant traveling part of who we are. I mean, when we die, we are doing something and we are going somewhere. And God is saying, follow me. But that path isn't always easy to find because we're not always using the right set of eyes to know where this path is. So as we saw, the pasture got thinner and harder to see. It wasn't that the path wasn't there. It's just less people traveled it. And so it wasn't as distinguished as maybe some of the other roads and paths that we've been on. Now, God's path is narrow and hard to find, but that doesn't mean that God's hiding it. Because God's giving that information to us. I mean, everywhere in the world that there are believers, there is the gospel message. We are called to preach the gospel, share his love. And so therefore, we are giving people that answer of this is where the gate is, this is where you should go. And it's not hard to find because it's hidden. It's hard to find because people don't want to find it. You give them all this stuff, and we see that a lot with these kids, is we'll get kids in that are just so turned off to Jesus for whatever reason, many different reasons. And you can give them all that information, but until they make that decision, I can guide them as much as I want to that gate, but they're the ones that have to walk through. And some of us do walk through that gate. Some of us walk through that gate and we make that decision to follow Jesus. We say, he is my Lord and Savior. We get baptized. We start to live that life for him. And often when we're on fire for God, we're like, I know where that path is. I'm going and I'm listening and I'm doing all this kind of stuff. And then things kind of get in the way and we get distracted and we get unsure. And it gets a little bit harder. And we're unsure of our next steps. And then we realize we can't make it on our own. And we're stuck on a road that looks like it's ended. And we go, I know I'm supposed to go somewhere, but I have no idea what to do. And that's the problem. I have no idea what to do. We got to a point where we're focused on who we are as ourselves, not who we are in Jesus. I don't know if it's just an American issue or if it's just a world thing. I know it is definitely a problem in America. America is a very individual, I can do it on my own society. And there's some great things that have come from that. You know, we've learned a lot and we've discovered a lot and we've done a lot of like industrial growing as a country because of this desire to pull our life up by the bootstraps and push on and get things done on our own because we can do it. But it doesn't translate well into our spiritual life. Because if we're sitting there going, I've made this, I can do this, I know this, Then when it comes to following God, we go, well, I can do this. And the reality is, if you've been a Christian for more than, I don't know, a few months even, you realize you can't do it on your own. You need God. That's the whole point of our relationship with God, is that we need God. And we get stuck in these ruts where we're sitting there going, I know I'm supposed to go somewhere, but I don't know where it goes. It's because we need Jesus. He didn't make the path of life a DIY project. He calls us to call him. He comes to us, but we have to allow him in our lives. We can't find the path that we didn't create. We can make our own path, and we can hit the big bumps in the holes and fall off the edge and run into things, and we can try to make it through. But it makes way more sense to follow the person who created the path in the first place. This narrow gate, this difficult path to life requires a guide. You know, we're blind, and we can't do it on our own. We're blind to what truly God has in store. I mean, we know he wants us to follow him, but he doesn't give us every little, he doesn't sit there and go, okay, for the next 40 years, here's your life laid out. He says, here's the next 40 years, come with me. We cannot do it on our own. We're not expected to do it on our own, even though we do try. Jesus speaks of life, a life that's messy. He speaks of 2 gates, 2 roads. One narrow, one wide. One difficult, one easy. One with life, one with death. And so often, at least I see, we almost try to jump between the two. And we go, well, I'm going to live my life for Jesus over here. But about 4 hours a day, or maybe the weekend on a Saturday or Friday, I'm gonna be over here. And then I'll hop back over here later and get on the right path, and then, I'll jump back over here. And once that's compromise. And eventually, or more often than not, the people who keep hopping back and forth spend more and more time on that easy path, more and more time on that path of selfishness and sin and temptation. And then they realize, where have I gone? What has happened? Because spiritual death doesn't come instantly. Spiritual death comes one compromise at a time. Little by little, we decide to stop following Jesus. It's never fast. I've seen, you probably have seen actors or influencers or whatever you want to call them out in the world that they used to be Christians, and now there's a name for it. The term that they use now is removing their faith. I can't remember what it's called, but they used to be Christians and now they're not. And they get on these podcasts and they explain, this is why I've stepped away from the faith. And if you really just kind of look at it on a surface level, you're like, oh man, something bad happened. But if you look at it a little bit deeper and dig into their lives, you realize, no, it's because they wanted this to happen. And they knew that they weren't supposed to do that. And so they just decided to choose this over Jesus. And they chose this over Jesus. And then they chose this over Jesus. And they ended up all the way over here. And they went, this is more comfortable. And they stayed there. So when we're on these paths, we need to remember, again, who is our guide and who is our leader. And it's not easy. And it's really not easy when you're trying to help someone else find that path as well. The world loves to get us off track. The media, the news, our coworkers, our neighbors, whatever it might be, loves to distract us. It leaks into every part of our life, our school, our work, what we read, our friendships. It can even work our way into churches too. I mean, I've seen churches that have fallen apart because they've started to accept certain things, allow certain things. And there might even be churches out there that still have the word church on the front, but they don't act at all like the church. And they've compromised so much so they're not even a body of believers in Jesus. But it didn't come instantly. It came from those little tiny decisions, from those distractions. And it's only getting worse. I mean, you read in the Bible and it's always getting worse. You see from the beginning of time and it just is getting worse. So what do? Well, we keep living life. We keep raising our families and we keep sharing Jesus with others. And that's kind of part of one of the reasons why we even stepped into a house parenting role. When we did youth and family ministry, we loved connecting with the kids. But anyone who's been in church ministry knows some of those kids you only get a couple hours a week. And the world gets them countless more. And so for Sunday and Wednesday nights, and maybe if you have an extra thing, you might have 2 or 3 times a week that you get this kid and you're able to teach them the truth, teach them the gospel, teach them Jesus' loves, and then they go home and they watch something that says, you're not good enough. Or they talk to people who say, you're not pretty enough. Or they go and are a part of a program, and that program teaches them something that's completely unbiblical. And then they come back, and then you teach them a little bit more. But then they're gone for hours and hours at a time. And so you're not getting that message to stay on this path regularly. And so we saw that in our ministry, and one of the things that we found as such a blessing being at Cookson is that these kids that are having these rough times, these rough families, that they need that truth. We get them all the time. They come into our homes and they're a part of our lives. And so we're able to walk alongside them and teach them Jesus, teach them the truth. And then they go to school where they also get taught Jesus and the truth and how to live life in a way that is honoring to God. And they come back home and the friends are surrounded are the friends that are also getting taught that same thing. And so they're able to not just hear about Christ, but live in a way that is honoring to him. And then we're able to help them stay on that path. Because our kids are growing up with issues with comparison, identity, who I am, what I am, fear, anxiety, whether they're even worth it. And that's not just kids from Cookson. That's everybody everywhere. That's our own lives that we're dealing with. And often these kids come to us with the questions of who am I and what am I supposed to do? I mean, isn't that kind of the big questions we have in our own life is who am I and what am I supposed to do? Now, some of us can say, oh, I know who we are. We're children of God. I am a child of God. What am I supposed to do? I'm supposed to honor God in all that I do. And that might be a simple answer for some of us. But for some of these kids, that is a whole different foreign world to them. And it's hard for them to figure that out because they've been ingrained with what the world has taught them. Now, some of them come with some religious worldviews. Some of them come that they've grown up at church. But it's still something that even as a kid, you still are learning and trying to figure out. And so we're helping them stay on that path. It's what we're called to do. It's what we're all called to do. I mean, whether it's a kid or your neighbor or your friend or your sibling or a spouse, you are called to help disciple and walk alongside people, not to take them on that path your own, but to introduce them to Jesus, the one who really knows where they need to go. He helps lead us. He helps guide us. But the world still loves to distract. The world still bombards us with everything. Even when we're trying. Even when we're doing our best, the world still gets in there. And that's one of the things, another thing I really love about Cookson is we try to get rid of those distractions. Help them focus on what's important. Now, some of the kids come and they think it's like prison because they don't get phones and they don't get social media. But I can tell you the ones who've been here for more than a couple years, they realize the blessing of not having a phone and not having social media and not being around the friends they used to be around and not having certain freedoms that they thought they should have that they realized those weren't probably the best freedoms to have. And so Cookson is a way to just kind of say, what are the most important things we need to focus on? Focusing on healthy relationships, creating time for study, not just in school, but in your own personal Bible study, devotionals, prayer and reflection, connecting kids, just life in general, and what that has to do with God. I mean, it's wonderful to be able to just walk alongside them and give them a message about Jesus when we're going out and living life and we see someone on the street, or there's an interaction we see at the store and they start to realize like, oh, that used to be my family, but it's not anymore. I'm in a place where I feel loved and cared for, and a place that loves and cares about Jesus and wants us to teach them about Jesus. And then we have a school that does that same thing. Now, we don't sequester ourselves. We don't wall up everything and keep everybody out, because otherwise we'll have trained them and then we send them out and then they have no idea what's going on. So we're still out there. We're still living life and connecting with people, but we do it in a way that is walking along with them, helping them see that path in the life and in the world. So that hopefully, prayerfully, when they step off that campus, whether it's in a few weeks, a few months, a few years, hopefully a few years, they have a better understanding of who they are and what they're supposed to do. That they're loved, not just by us, but especially by God. That they know what they're supposed to do in their life. Not necessarily their job. Like I said, we're all ministers of the gospel in a way, because we are all meant to share the message of Jesus. And so they know, well, hopefully, that when they step out, that they're not just there to get a job, start a family, but to do it all with the love of God and the building of the kingdom. It's not easy. It's not foolproof. It's difficult, but it's worth it. Life is a hard path. It's a very hard path when we are constantly being fought by the world. And we know it's easier when we have people alongside us to support us in that. Whether you had your parents support you, or your grandparents, or your friends. And we do that with these kids. And I want to thank you because you do that with us. It's a group effort. You walk alongside us and you help us with things like this, to help alleviate some of those things that can be distractions. Because you can have no phones, no social media. You can try to avoid any negative stuff on the news, things like that. But you still have bills to pay. You still have a roof to reshingle or gutters to clean and things like. You have all these other things that can become distractions. And so you being able to walk alongside and help with some of that physical, help with the prayer, help with the service and the support, just anything like that helps us to be able to spend more time with the kids, to love on them, and to help them in that right path. So, thank you. I'm going to pray, and then we will close out. Lord, we are so blessed. So blessed to have your love and your mercy and your grace. And we're blessed that you want us to share that with others. We thank you for Leon Christian Church and their support of Cookson. We couldn't do what we do without the support of people like these. We know that your kingdom is far greater than we could even imagine, and you can do far more than we can ask. But we also know that your miracles can come from other Christians stepping up, serving and loving and giving. And we thank you just that we can see these miracles every single year as we realize that we are still able to serve these kids, care for these kids, because we have such a wonderful family of churches and believers that want to support and care for these kids as well. I just pray that we can be a light to every person in our life, to be able to help guide them on a path, but more importantly, guide them to you so that you can lead them in the right way. Help us to stay on that narrow path, to be sure-footed and confident through you, so that we can bring others to you. I love you. It's in your name we pray.